9 o'clock and the A-level results are out. Today, of course, should be the day when hundreds of thousands of teenagers in England, Wales and Northern Ireland find out if they've done enough to progress on to university, training or employment. But instead of clarity, there can be confusion. Because of the pandemic, no exams were taken, and so results have been estimated. Earlier, I spoke to the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson. I began by asking if he knew what percentage of grades had been changed by this standardising process from those marks that were awarded by teachers.
I'm not in a position to be able to give those figures. Those will be released at 9:30 today, as is usually done. But 97% of youngsters who will be receiving their grades will be getting either the grade that the school actually gave or within one grade of what that school gave. So that's 97% of those. And we are going to be seeing the number of A's and A stars increase by 2% this year over last year as well.
Well, the percentage in Scotland was roughly 25% that were changed. It does appear that it is going to be substantially higher in England at the very least. 40% appears to be the figure. The principal of Newnham Sixth Form College said 47%, 301 out of 646 grades were downgraded. Another college, 55% were downgraded. Another school, 49% of all grades have been downgraded. I mean, one head teacher asked me to ask this question: how is this possible?
Well, we've got to make sure there's proper checks and balances within the system. And we do recognise that when Ofqual came up with this system, it consulted widely on it, it consulted widely with schools and colleges as it pulled this system together. And it is important that if you do not have checks and balances within the system, you'll have even greater unfairness where potentially some people would take advantage of the fact that there aren't checks and balances. But there are going to be some students who are in a situation where they receive a grade that isn't reflective of their work and of their efforts over the last few years. And that's why it's been so important to put in place the triple lock, make sure that there's systems in place so that they can have those grades very quickly and very rapidly looked at, and if those grades need to be changed, if they got a valid mock exam, that can form the absolute basis in terms of actually then getting that grade. And there's a whole series of sort of routes of appeal that the school can take forward. But on top of
what you've essentially just said is that teachers have been taking advantage of the fact that there are no checks and balances, isn't it?
No, not at all, because actually teachers have worked incredibly hard. But what we did in terms of creating this system, actually, there's been a wide understanding, because unlike in Scotland, we consulted on this system, we actually published as to how it was going to work, so there's a clear understanding by teachers and by schools and colleges as to the approach that we're taking. This was something that didn't happen in Scotland, and we've been absolutely open and transparent in terms of how we're going to be doing this and how we have done this. But there is a fine. Oh, sorry.
No. As you say, there have been academics and there have been teachers who have been contributing to the process and coming up with this system. At the same time, there have been plenty of others who have been screaming for months now that we were heading for precisely this kind of situation. Just explain to the pupils that are watching this morning in what way it is fair that an individual's performance can be accurately gauged in part by what happened to the entire year at that school the previous year.
So what we've done in terms of what Ofqual did in terms of actually pulling together this system is actually look really closely at the progression that those students have actually been making through that school. They've looked very closely at the individual assessments of every single teacher that every single teacher has put in.
But for the individual who has worked their backside off for the entire year, how is it right that they can see their grade that their teacher has given them downgraded because of the performance of the year before?
Well, it's actually on the performance of what those children have been doing and the progress that they have been making, and actually the progress that that school has been adding to what those children do. But at the centrepiece of all of this is actually the grades and the ranking order that the school gives to each of those children. So that is at the sort of cornerstone of actually the awarding of grades by the exam board and by the assessment and the invigilation of what Ofqual does. But I can't sit here and say that every single child, there won't be a single child in this country that will be in won't be in a situation of where they've got a grade that isn't a fair reflection of their work. That's why we took the decision in terms of a triple lock, making sure there's an incredibly robust appeals process so that youngsters are able to go down that appeals process and get get those issues addressed. And what we're hearing from, what we're also hearing from UCAS just before I came on is the fact that actually, youngsters, when they get their grades, you're going to be seeing more youngsters getting A's and A stars and have done in previous years. You're going to see young people doing better than maybe the previous year's cohort. And when they go to their universities or to their colleges, they're going to be seeing that the opportunities are open for them in order to progress, in order for them to go to university, in order to be able to continue their study or go into the world of work.
Can we talk for a second then about the appeals process, an appeals process based on mock exams? Again, how is that fair, given that there is no standardised process by which mock exams are set? And indeed, in addition to that, many students in England will not have sat their mocks because their schools went into lockdown. How is that fair?
So as you all know, the overwhelming majority of schools across England have actually sort of sat mock exams, usually sort of take place earlier than when the lockdown would have happened.
But they do it in different ways. They do it in different ways. I'm sorry to keep interrupting, Minister. Deborah Kidd, former teacher, academic, gives an example. Teacher A does a short mock to boost the confidence of her shaky class. Teacher B does a full mock and marked them harshly to give her complacent class a push. Teacher C didn't do mocks with her class. See the problem yet, Gavin Williamson?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt, the best form of awarding qualifications is making sure that you have a full exam series. But we weren't in a situation of running a full exam series this year, so you have to put in a system that is both fair, it is both robust, but there is an ability for youngsters to be able to...
standardised approach to mocks? How is it? In fact, in addition to that, Ofqual...
Would you mind...
this morning, Ofqual have not yet got to the position where they are able to tell schools what qualifies as a valid mock. Students are getting the results today and will not know until next week sometime whether or not this appeals process is going to be open to them.
Yeah. So Ofqual are going to be sharing that information in the early part of next week. We'll be asking schools to be able to, where they don't think there's been a fair reflection of pupils' work and efforts, to be able to pull that evidence together, and Ofqual will be turning that round with the exam boards as an incredibly speedy process to ensure that youngsters, if they are in a position that they need a better grade and they don't think that they've got a fair grade as part of the moderated grade system, that's turned round swiftly because universities have pushed back the date in order for them to be able to make the final decisions, and those appeals are going to be able to be heard by the 7th of September so that they're able to have that information and able to progress onto university, onto college or into the workplace.
Why was Ofqual not in a position on results day to be able to tell people whether or not they might have an opportunity to appeal on the basis of their mocks? Why was that not ready for today?
So we were in a position where we made a decision to give young people, wanted to enhance the fairness, make sure that enhance the options for appeal, make sure that young people have the best possible options in front of them. And Ofqual are working at great speed to ensure that this will be out and with schools in the next few days. And, I know that the people at Ofqual work incredibly hard to ensure that that happens.
Yeah, I asked the question again. Why was that not ready for today? We're just hearing that Ofqual have cancelled their press conference for today.
The reason that sort of Ofqual would have haven't got it ready for today is because, there's obviously a decision that was made sort of later on in the process, and that they're working to make sure that that information is shared with schools and colleges over the next few days.
But why? I mean, you've known this was coming for months. People have been warning you of this situation for months. Ofqual have clearly been bumped into this at the last minute. That's why they're not doing it until Monday. I mean, I just don't understand why, given the fact that you knew these problems existed within the system, that they were warned about it, that you waited until the Scottish Government acted, of all things, the day before A-level results come out. It looks horribly rushed, back of a fag packet, reactionary policy-making on the hoof.
Well, what you've seen is both England, Wales and Northern Ireland follow the same approach in terms of taking this approach, because we feel it enhances fairness for students, and I think that's the right thing to do. Anything that I can do to make things more fair for students, give them the best possible options, and make sure that they get the grades and the results that they deserve as a result of the work, I think that's the right thing to do. And as Education Secretary, it was the right decision to make this move and actually give youngsters more options and more fairness.
Can you give a cast-iron guarantee, triple locked, if you will, that you will not be forced into the embarrassing U-turn that John Swinney and Nicola Sturgeon were in Scotland, that standardisation, this scheme that you have been warned about for months, is staying, and you're not going to be doing a U-turn?
Absolutely. And when we've consulted widely, and when Ofqual consulted widely in terms of the whole system of awarding, this is the message that we got from everyone. This is the right approach to go forward. You've got to have a system that has checks and balances, that looks at the whole performance and making sure that you maintain standards within the exam system to ensure that that those results carry credibility.
Well, let's find out the situation around the country. Our correspondent Adele Robinson at a school in Northampton, where pupils are getting their A-levels. Fraser Maud at Sunderland College, pupils there picking up their vocational results. Tom Parmenter at the Clearing Centre for Manchester Metropolitan University. Morning to all of you. Adele, to you first. I was on tenterhooks last hour with the three students. It seemed to go pretty positively for them. How about across the board, though?
Well, here, only a handful of students may have to appeal. I'm going to bring in Helena Brothwell, Executive Principal, of the school. First of all, do you think that the current process in place is fair for students? That, we've been hearing hundreds, if not thousands, being downgraded across the country.
Yes, I mean, obviously, we would want, in an ideal situation, every student would sit their exams. But in the midst of a global pandemic, I think, this system will work. It's it's our job as school leaders now to translate that and reassure our communities. We're focused very heavily on destinations. If our students get to where it is they want to get to next, that's our top priority.
Okay. The government say that they won't take teachers' predicted grades because they feel that it would overinflate grades. Do you agree with that?
I think there certainly has to be an assessment system in place to moderate, and that's the exam board that's doing that. The exam board moderates grades every year, and that system needs to be in place to make sure that there is parity and that those results are are authentic. And yeah.
Do you think that there's a suggestion basically that some teachers might be overinflating grades? Do you think that's the case?
We know that there's unconscious bias in the system. We know that that's the case, and that's not something people do on purpose, but sometimes it can happen. And what we want to make sure is that these grades are as accurate and as reliable as possible.
Okay, thank you. Helena Brothwell, Executive Principal here at the school. So a different point of view, I think, from many other teachers potentially across the country.
Adele, many thanks. Let's turn our attention to Fraser Maud, joining us from Sunderland. Fraser, first things first, I need you to find that young lad Matthew that I spoke to last hour. Get his address. I need to post him a pint. But you're looking at the vocational end of the results that are coming out today. Just tell us what's been happening where you are.
Yeah, well, hopefully there should be much less need for appeal because of the vocational nature of BTECs and so on. They're much more based on constant assessment rather than predicted grades, as the A-levels have been. Ellen Finneson, Chief Exec here at Sunderland College, I guess that makes it a lot clearer as to the value of these grades, doesn't it, the BTECs?
Well, look, I think when you study a BTEC qualification, you leave with the academic knowledge and underpinning and then the applied vocational competency in any given sector. So our students leaving this college and leaving further education come from careers-focused backgrounds, and they have that employment edge to successfully position them in a competitive place within the market.
And in terms of any controversy, you're happy with the grades that are being given? There's not going to be too many that are going to be appealed or contested?
I have a very big smile on my face today, and I think that's testimony to the hard work of this brilliant staff across my organisation who have taken an incredibly robust approach to ranking and grading assessments. So I can tell you, this morning I was talking about a high level of confidence. This afternoon, now I'm saying I'm very, very happy.
OK, well, look, thanks very much for talking to us. Really appreciate it. That's the latest from Sunderland College here. Hand back over to you.
Fraser, thanks very much. Let's now move to the clearing office at Manchester Metropolitan University. Tom Parmenter is joining us from there. Tom, it looks like plenty of work is going on already. The phones must be ringing off the hook.
Yeah, they are. It's always the case that people need that bit of help and guidance, but particularly so this year. Let's bring in Helen Neville from the university. Helen, what is the picture that you're picking up this morning on the calls that are coming in here?
We're getting the same sort of calls that we would any year. So this would be about students who we've confirmed, we've let them know that they've got a place here and they're calling to talk that through. Or we've offered them a slightly different course and they're calling to find out a bit more about that. We get those calls anyway. We're getting calls from people who hadn't thought of university or have applied late and want to come in through clearing. That would happen any year. It'll be a while before we really get a sense of direction of travel. We are getting some new calls that perhaps go a little bit more different this year, particularly students who had applied to go to university, Manchester students, who'd applied to go to university somewhere else in the country, but decided they'd rather stay at home and be a commuting student. So we're getting a few more of those than we had before. And also students who'd applied to, we're going to do a gap year this year, and have looked at it and decided it's better to go to university this year. So we're getting those kind of calls as well.
If students have had their grades downgraded and they're appealing, how does that work? How do you sort that out?
Well, for students who've already applied for us, we have an awful lot of information about those students. So, as you know from filling in the UCAS form, it's not just about grades. We have personal statements, we've often done interviews, we've portfolios. So we're able to look at that and already, for students who've applied, make some decisions on the basis of what they've got. But for other students, there is a system, and we're giving a lot of information about what they can do around that situation.
OK, Helen, thanks very much for joining us live on Sky News. The calls coming in all the time are very interesting day today to see how it pans out for students, particularly those that haven't got the grades that they wanted. What is the next step?
Indeed. Tom, many thanks. Investigations are continuing.